Get started.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so we're going to get started. Welcome everyone to another one of the center's Zoom classes. Tonight's class will be on good enough parenting. And I just want to let you know before we start that tonight's session will be recorded. And if time allows, we will accept questions in the chat. You can either send them privately to me if you don't want your name attached to it, or just to everyone. So I want to thank Dr. Regine Galanti. Regine is a licensed clinical psychologist and the founder of Long Island Behavioral Psychology. She specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy and focuses on treating children and teens with anxiety. And here's a copy of her new book. And for those of you who haven't already figured it out, she is my daughter, and I am immensely proud of her. And thank you for doing this tonight, Regine.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. It's fun to talk to the center because it's cool to talk to a place that, you know, is so pre-career for me, and then also fun to do this with my mother, I guess. We'll see how that goes. I reserve the right to take that back. Yeah, so sorry, I had to turn my phone off so people don't text me in the middle and I get distracted. So I am, like my mother said, if anyone has any questions at any point, throw them in the chat. You can throw them privately to me, and I'll put my email also in the chat and my website. And my publisher, I told my publisher I was doing a talk tonight, and they said, oh, do a giveaway. So I'll throw up the sign up for the giveaway also in the chat. If you want a copy of my book, feel free to fill it out. And they said they'll throw some copies my way, and I'm allowed to throw them out to whoever wants them. So that's always a good thing.
Free stuff. We love free stuff. Okay, so let's get started with some questions. So what do you want people to know about parenting during these crazy, unexpected circumstances?
So I think the biggest thing I want people to know is that you're not homeschooling. So I know a lot of us are parents. And I've heard a lot of people say that kind of thing, like, oh, it's so hard to homeschool my kids. Yes, it would be hard to homeschool your kids, but that's not what you're doing. What you're doing is actually trying to help your kids learn in a crazy situation that no one signed up for and no one expected. So you didn't choose to homeschool your kids. You didn't choose to work from home. You didn't choose to do both those things at the same time in your house with no support, no babysitter, no cleaning help. So we're all allowed a certain amount of slack. That wouldn't be the case if we all decided voluntarily to live this way. Because of that, we're going to have to make compromises, and being a good enough parent right now is basically perfect, because if you're trying to do it all, things are going to fall and you're not going to be able to do that.
So that brings up a lot of emotions. And what kind of emotional reactions would you say are normal as a parent?
So really all of them. There's a lot of research on other quarantines, people who are stuck in situations that they can't kind of get out of. And what we know about their emotional reactions is that it's very normal to have some symptoms, almost like you've experienced a trauma. So you might be feeling more emotional than normal, more worried, more tense, physically. So some people carry tension in their bodies. You might find yourself having a lot less patience for your kids or for your spouse. That would be normal, or even for yourself. And you also might not know what you're feeling. You might feel disconnected from your own feelings. That's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. It's almost like your body has no idea what's going on. It's like, oh, I don't know what's happening. Let's just shut down until we can figure this out and reopen, which is normal for a short amount of time. But almost by this point, you should be starting to get those feelings back. So if you're not, that's one of those things, and I'm going to go back to this a lot, that's one of those reactions that I would say time to reach out and ask for more help. But I specialize in anxiety, like my mom said, and typically what I tell people is anxiety is like pizza burning in the toaster when really, but you're viewing it as if your house is on fire. You think like, oh my God, 4 alarm fire, but really it's the toaster seeming like smoking a little bit. This is not that. This is your house being on fire. So you're reacting like your house is on fire because your house is on fire. So it makes sense to be freaking out and to feel really anxious. But it's also, so anxiety is the way you're supposed to be feeling, because that also brings on certain emotions. Like, because we feel anxious, it makes us more on guard and it makes us safer. So you notice when someone kind of comes too close to you in the grocery store and you're like, wait, what's that person doing? They have to back up because your anxiety is telling you to notice those things. So it makes you more on guard, more aware, which is a good thing, but it just feels really uncomfortable. And there's nothing else to do about it because it's not going to go away till the threat passes. So
it's true.
That's rough.
It's rough. And why don't they all go in one direction in the supermarket? It would just make it so much easier. I wouldn't freak out every time someone passed me.
Well, there's a supermarket near me that has arrows on the ground. They put big giant arrows.
In our
But
neighborhood,
then people have to listen to the arrows, so that's the problem.
Yeah. And so what about for the kids?
So again, we know that kids are largely resilient. So kids bounce back from a lot of things. And if you give them the right tools, they'll bounce back from anything, and they're able to kind of adapt much quicker than adults. But again, what we know based on research is that kids' emotional health is largely dependent on their parents' emotional health. So taking care of yourself as a parent is really key to helping your kids succeed here. So people tell me all the time, well, how am I supposed to have time to take care of myself when my kids need this and that and this and signing on to Zoom and figuring this out and what's the password to this? Yeah, I get this. But if you don't find the ways to take care of yourself, your kids are going to do worse. So the best way you can take care of your kids is by taking care of yourself. But kids' reactions really can run the gamut from you don't see any differences, they seem like they have no idea that anything even changed, to anxiety, which for kids can show up as major clinginess, can show up as a lot of question asking, which again could be the case even in kids who weren't going through a pandemic. They could be checking for safety a lot, like, are you sure this is okay? Are you sure this is okay? Are you sure this is okay? It also might not be related. So you might see a kid panicking about, whether the door is locked, and not whether someone's going to get a virus. And in a kid's brain, those two are connected, but in yours, they make no sense. For younger kids, you might also see regression. So a kid who's toilet trained, all of a sudden having a lot of accents, kid who's sleeping alone, all of a sudden, wanting to be in your bed or with a sibling again. That is somewhat normal. And also behavior problems. So little kids especially don't always know how to process information. So what they do is they throw tantrums or they act out, they scream. And if you're asking yourself, why is my kid freaking out? I don't understand. And, it's not on your mind like, oh, okay, this is coronavirus related, because it doesn't seem like it. It seems like they're just throwing their food on the floor for no reason. But the reason why they're throwing their food on the floor is because everybody's home all the time. They have no idea what's going on, and they don't have the language to tell you, I don't know what's going on or where this is or how this is happening. So the answer is probably this is coronavirus. And then one last point. Also, we know that stress brings out underlying conditions. So this is a very, very stressful situation. If you have a kid who's a little anxious beforehand, this kind of coronavirus-like crisis multiplies these issues. And they really might not just blow over when this goes away, because the kind of foundation for the anxiety was there before. And one way I like to think about this is think about if you or your spouse is anxious, that's already kind of genetically loading your kid in that direction. And then you have a major stressor like what's going on right now that can tip your kid over the edge. And that again is something to say, okay, maybe it's time to get my kid help, even if it's not an ideal time or in an ideal way. Same with behavior problems. Just because coronavirus tipped it over the edge doesn't mean that it'll go away when it's done. It might, but I'd be careful about watching out for that.
Wow. So can you talk about some skills that parents can use to manage these emotions?
Sure. So one skill that I think that is super underrated and feels weird a lot of the skills I teach people actually feel really weird the first time you try them. But what I tell the people in my office, and I'll tell you guys, is try something, 7 to 10 times before you decide it doesn't work. So self-compassion. We're really good at looking at other people and saying, oh my gosh, I can't, it's so hard for them. They have so many kids. They're all locked in such a small house and they don't even have a backyard. What are they going to do? And your heart goes out to them. So self-compassion is the same as compassion for others. But it means treating yourself the same way you would treat another person. So asking yourself, what would I tell a friend in that same situation? So what would I tell a friend if my friend had all her kids at home and was trying to manage all their schedules and something ended up happening? She ended up yelling at her kids, totally losing it. What would I say to that friend? Would I say, oh yeah, you're definitely the worst mother. You're never going to recover from this. And I'm sorry, you totally screwed up your kids. Yeah, that's it. That's the end. Or would you be like, no, I totally get it. Are you joking? I yelled at my kid 6 times yesterday. Or if your friend was on a work call and not prepared because he's managing 3 different devices and schedules and Zoom meetings, what would you say? Would you say your friend dropped the ball? Or would you say, this is just a lot and you need to take a step back and recognize that you're not superhuman here? So think about what you would tell someone else and tell yourself the same thing. And it won't feel right because you're going to tell yourself, no, but that's ridiculous. I should have done better. I should have made the 7-course gourmet meal for lunch. And the fact that I didn't means I'm a slacker. So be very mindful of the fact that your brain doesn't like being compassionate to yourself if you're not used to it.
Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. Okay. So practically though, what does self-compassion while parenting look like? What is that,
So it really means being gentle with yourself and all those complicated feelings that come with this new normal. That it's okay to let your kids watch 700 hours more screen time than they usually do. And if you're not able to keep up with the Pinterest moms who have the color-coded schedule hour by hour, that's okay. Chances are they're not keeping up with their own schedules anyway. I go back to this idea over and over that we didn't choose to live our lives this way, so we need to cut ourselves some slack. It's okay if you hear other kids in the background or your kids don't learn about fractions until next year. It's really okay. And I know this is something that cognitively we can tell ourselves, but emotionally it feels wrong. But the more you tell it to yourself, the more you'll adjust to, this is what I'm going to have to do. I have to prioritize some things over others.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. And you gave the example of school. A lot of parents are super stressed out about the expectations of school right now.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. School went from being this place that we send our kids. We're like, hey, you go fill your brains, and then we're going to get our own stuff done. We're going to do most of our jobs. And then all of a sudden, we are the teacher's assistant. We are the secretary. We are the disciplinarian. And we also are the short order cook and managing the house and all the other roles that we're doing on top of that. And then you have some teachers who are super flexible and totally get it. And then there are other teachers who don't know how to use text. So you're looking up their noses and they can't screen share and they have no idea how to mute everybody. And they have completely unrealistic expectations for the kids. So they're treating it as if just go. Everything's the same. We're gonna finish the curriculum and everything's fine. And they're intolerant of let's say a sibling walking into the room or any tech failures. I don't understand why you can't just log on to a new device if this didn't work. Everybody just has random devices. Or they have unrealistic expectations for the parents. Hey, you need to sit next to your 6-year-old the whole time while they're in school, pretending they're your only kid. Or you have the pink heart instruction paper that they wanted you to have. What you need to think about is what's important to you. And yes, of course, education matters, but there's more than one way for a kid to learn. So recognize that Zoom school might not be ideal for everyone, and you got to give yourself some slack. That just because schools switched over to Zoom doesn't mean that your expectation as a parent should be the same in terms of now I have to give my kid the same like school experience that they had before.
Cool enough.
Because it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. So there's been like a lot of, I've heard people being concerned about, you know, the screen time guidelines and things like that. I'm not, wait, somebody else is making noise here.
Yeah, the screen time guidelines are huge. So there's the screen time guidelines that we kind of heard about before, like how long you could actually, you should be putting your kid in front of a screen based on their age a day, which is, again, out the window, throw it out, don't even pay attention to those. But there's also guidelines for how long a kid can use focused attention in, let's say, Zoom school. So how long you can sustain your attention on a screen. And what the research shows, it's like 2 to 3 minutes per year of age. So for a 3-year-old, 10 minutes max is all you're getting from them. And for a 6-year-old, that's like less than 20 minutes. And for a 10-year-old, that's a half hour. So that means that's all they can focus on. If your preschooler Zoom is a half hour and they're wandering away after, 7 minutes, that's because they're a 3-year-old. That's what's normal for them. So we're expecting too much. But I think this is specifically even important for the older kids, because I know some schools are having just a lot, like hour-long classes and 3 in a row. Our brains, for some reason, are not set up to digest information in that way. I've been having this. I'm doing a lot of virtual therapy, and one thing I notice is it's very hard for me to stay in this box, right? Normally, I'm moving. I want to get my sweatshirt, and it's as if I disappear, like I can't move, which is really hard. So expecting the same from kids is really, really, really difficult. And we're only talking about kids who are completely going through normative development, who have no issues at all. We're not talking about the kids with ADHD or anxiety or anything else that will even make being able to focus in this kind of setting 700 times harder. Some kids are doing much better in this kind of setting, but for a lot of kids, parents are trying to keep up with this unrelenting standard and huge hurdles, and we need to broaden the definition of success. If you're cooking with your kids, that's math, and also it could be reading, and it could also be, thinking and conversions, and there's a lot that goes into everyday activities. And this, again, depends on what kind of parent you are, but you don't need to force your kid and yourself into this major school struggle if it's not working for anyone.
Right, so if school's supposed to be so much shorter, how can parents help their kids succeed? How are they supposed to manage?
So again, I think you need to broaden the definition of success in terms of learning. School is about learning, so think about learning, not about school. And know your kid. So if your kid is doing well with it, great. But if your kid is struggling, think about what's really important to you and to them and push for that. And don't push for the things that aren't working for your kid. Also, especially for younger kids, the preschool set, try and create some structure in your life and your kids' life. So this is not again, color-coded schedules. Even though if that works for you, great, do it. Structure means regular meal times and bedtimes. And with little kids who don't really understand the passage of time, it means creating times of day when you do things. Like if you go for a walk first thing in the morning, your 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old will learn that's the first thing that happens for me after breakfast. So they learn to expect it. And that is something that real school used to do, right? You eat breakfast, you get dressed, you get on the bus, or you get in carpool and you go to school. But now there's no kind of flow to your day. So creating a flow to a preschooler's day is a thing that will be humongously helpful and cut down a lot of the behavior problems and a lot of the tantrums, especially even screen time battles. If you are not letting your kid watch whatever they want whenever they want it, putting it at a certain time of day, before lunch, after lunch, gets a kid used to it. The first few days will be horrible because they will not have expected that kind of structure. But after a couple days, when they realize, like, okay, this is what happens. After lunch, we do this. They'll get into a groove and your life will be a lot easier. And then another piece of this is sleep. So I know a lot of people are telling me, well, what's the point of putting my kids to bed? It's not like we're doing anything else anyway. But make sure your sleep and your kids' sleep is normal, because sleep gets disrupted a lot with anxiety and with stress. So even if it's kind of different hours than it used to be, you can go to bed a little later, wake up a little later, that's fine. Make sure your kids are getting enough sleep. And you can Google like sleep guidelines by age, but younger kids should really be getting 12, 13 hours. Teenagers should also, they typically want 12 to 13 hours too, which is something that they don't normally get, but now they can. But there's this voice in your brain that's like, hey, just stay up. And bad things happen in the middle of the night in your brain. Like nothing good happens after, let's say, 1 a.m. The parts of your brain that control your logical thought shut down. So you're left with all the emotional mess, and those stick. So your brain kind of goes to this place where it's like, you know, well, I could have touched the box that I wasn't supposed to, and maybe I have coronavirus now. So sleep's important. And then another thing that also helps anchors kids is helping them connect to others. So this is for you and for them. So connection is super important in terms of managing a lot of those complicated feelings that come with anxiety. And I hate the term social distancing, because I think physical distancing is a much better word.
Yeah, I don't like that term either. I agree with you.
Yeah, because you can still connect socially. You just can't be physically together. So calling or FaceTiming friends, even people you would normally text, but not talking about the coronavirus. If you talk about the coronavirus, you're gonna hang up more anxious. So one thing you can do to support your own mental health is banning conversations about coronavirus. It'll help you feel better. It'll help the people around you feel better. It'll help your kids feel better, because as much as you think they're not listening, kids are always listening, and it comes out in weird ways. So, and making sure your kids connect, even if it looks like they don't care. Like, you know, put them in front of a FaceTime call with their friends for 3 minutes, just so they can see their friends, or take a walk to their friends and wave in the window. You know, we know connection is one of the best ways to make sure that some of those strong emotions that you might be feeling get better.
So you just touched upon this. So what about helping kids manage all this coronavirus related stuff, like that specifically? How do you deal with that with young children?
Oh, so be honest with them and don't assume they don't know anything. They've heard things. So being honest could be there's a virus, we have to keep everybody safe, and that's why we're staying home. You can also Google. There are some fantastic resources, you know, that you can use to talk to young kids. Talk to them on their level, and keep your own emotions out of it when you're talking to a kid. So if I'm telling my kid, you know, I tell my kids that the neighbor's mother died, and they know the neighbor and they care, but that's, for me, my job is not to talk about my own grief and sadness for my neighbor at that time. That's for me to process with adults. But for them, it's, this is sad, but she also was 94 and people die. So, you know, so we're sad about this and we're sad for him, and you know, and that's the end. But then the other thing you do is you leave the conversation open for questions. So you tell kids, if you have a question about this, let me know, because kids don't process information linearly. They'll talk, and you talk about it once, you think it's done, and then 2 days later, they're playing a game where they're, you know, laying out the thing you talked about, and that's another opportunity. So also know that grief is different for kids, especially now. Kids don't necessarily grieve the same way. They ask kind of, again, inappropriate questions that seem inappropriate but are normal. But especially without grieving rituals, like we don't have Shiva now, we don't have the things that we would normally provide closure. For kids, that might mean that they're not going to process that all till later, because they're not seeing anyone. So if they lose someone in their circle, they're not going to know really that they're lost for a while, which is going to be complicated, and we'll have to work that out then. But there are some great resources for talking to kids about grief. I'll stick them in the chat too. Let's see. Yes, and sorry.
You can even do that while you're talking? She's amazing. So, yeah, I mean, you know, this community.
Someone asked what else is there to talk about besides coronavirus. You can talk about your baking. You can talk about how annoyed you are, your spouses and kids. That's allowed. Talk about your sourdough starter, you know, like everybody's baking bread. Talk about that.
I just put up Chali, actually, for the first time in, I don't know, 10 years.
No, you said it's the second time in a lot of years.
Second time, you're right. I was exaggerating. It is the second time. So, you know, I mean, you know, our community, we're incredibly close, and families are really very used to being together all the time. So what about being far apart from families? And also, what about, like, when you're talking to kids about, you know, you're trying to do the right thing, and you're watching people who aren't being as careful. I mean,
oh, again, I know it's a really tough one. Like, people want to be together, you know, like we're used to. It's funny because then I was reading about the Italy stuff, I guess, before I came here. They talk about Italy, why the coronavirus was so bad there is because they have these multi-generational families who won't stay apart. And I'm like, that sounds familiar. Multi-generational families who won't stay apart. I get it, but if, you know, reminding yourself over and over, I'm choosing this path because I want to keep my family safe. And as hard as this is an active choice. It's not a passive choice. I saw someone say online, I loved it, don't just sit there, stay home. Like that shift from this is not a passive thing. This is an active thing that I'm choosing to do because I love the people around me. And find ways to connect, to be online games, FaceTime calls. There's no magic option here, right? It's a choice between the option you have and nothing. So you can, I guess, like what we want is we want to be able to be with our families and not get anybody sick. That is not an option on the table. We can choose to be with our families, but it's a risk, and it's a risk that a lot of people are not willing to take. Or we can choose not to be with our families, in which case everybody will be safe and we'll miss them. But you do not have the option of both being safe and being together. So kind of choose your best one.
So now it seems like at the beginning it was kind of cute. You gave your kid a haircut and you posted it on Instagram, but now it's time for another haircut, and it's like quarantine fatigue is sort of setting in, and sometimes you just get like completely overwhelmed and you don't know what to do to manage things. So what, you know, how can parents, can you help them figure out what to do when they really are just like done?
Yeah, so know that that's so normal. The other thing about anxiety that I know, again, from my practice is that you get used to it and then things get better. So we're at the point we're kind of getting used to the anxiety, and it's not as making us anxious anymore. You know, it's not as scary to go to the grocery store as it was a month ago. And because of that, you're like, okay, I'm done. I'll just go for a haircut. It's not worth it. Even though you know it's not, but you have that fatigue. So, and you're feeling overwhelmed. So know that that feeling is normal. Again, back to self-care. If you want to take care of your kids, you put on your own oxygen mask, then you take care of your kids. So think about what you're doing for you. It's okay to give yourself a timeout as a parent. Figure out what your self-care is. If it's making a nice salad for lunch, if it's eating a pint of ice cream for lunch, if it is exercising, if it's sitting outside, if it's going for a walk by yourself, carve out that space for yourself. Sit alone in your room for 5 minutes. You know, blast the music so you don't hear the kids banging on the door. Think about what you do for you and do it every single day. And then also break it down into small units. So survive through breakfast, and then breakfast to lunch, and lunch to dinner, dinner to bedtime, and congratulations, you made it through one day. So we know that humans are resilient, and we know we adapt. So we're going to adapt to this whether or not we like it. And this week is already 1,000 times different from 6 weeks ago, so you're going to get through this. And if it helps, another thing you can do is make a list when you have some free time of all the things you actually like to do that you can do while you're stuck at home. And when you have no idea what to do with yourself or you're feeling down, look at the list and say, hey, what can I do now? Like, what did I say I liked? I might disagree now, but I can do it later.
That's a good suggestion. Very good. So what about that feeling that you say, well, if I don't support my kids through this, if I don't take care of their school needs, if I let them watch those 700 hours of TV instead of baking cupcakes, does that make me a bad parent? Like, those people have those feelings.
Yeah. So one thing I say in therapy all the time is all your feelings are normal. All your feelings are normal. We don't have to act on our feelings. That's the difference. So just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean you have to act the way that feeling tells you to. But guess what? You can't do it all. You're not superhuman. So sit down and prioritize. Sit down and say, what is actually important to me here? So there's a strategy that I use in therapy. You can actually Google it. It's called the values card sort. It basically, yeah, if you were just going to Google it, that's what you would Google. It has a list of words that are values that are important. And if you look at the words, you're like, these are all important to me. Respected, education, good parent, good sibling, good child, healthy and fit, creative, just, organized, all nice things. But what you have to do is you take these index cards and you have to sort them into priority, most important to me, somewhat important to me, and not important to me. And you keep sorting until you come up with your top 3 or 4. So you might say everything's important to me, but when you really kind of have to rank them versus each other, you're left with, your top 3. So you might think that you value a clean house above everything else, but when it comes down to it, you actually are saying that your most important values are health, education, and family relationships. So guess what? If you don't have a housekeeper, you need to drop the cleaning in order to focus on the exercise and helping your kids through school, because that's what's important to you. And again, it covers with there's no magic perfect option where you get everything you want. So if you're dropping things, what are you dropping? And values are a really good way to know what to drop and what not to drop. And then another suggestion that I have for parents who are really overwhelmed is pick one thing to do with your kids every day. So one craft, one dance, one cooking thing, one exercisey thing. If you're baking, let them craft the eggs. They love it. And then it's a big mess and that's your, that qualifies as the activity. And then let everything go. Let them play independently. Let them make a mess. Let them watch TV. And tell yourself it's okay because it's PBS Kids, so it's educational, but you having that one thing that you do with them can kind of act as their anchor if you do it at the same time every day, and also fill that need. I'm doing something for my kids. And then actually I have one more suggestion that as a parent you can do, which is, I call it special time. It's 5 minutes of one-on-one time that you do with your kids every day. One-on-one meaning you lock the other kids out, you pull out a toy, you play with that kid, and you give them a lot of positive attention and just play what they want. In my practice, this is like the magic Band-Aid of all problems. It just makes kids feel so good to have this time. It has to be pretty much every day. It's supposed to aim for 7 days. Younger kids, I would say definitely 5 minutes every day, like 2 to 7, but as a kid gets older, you need more time. So more like 10 to 15 minutes, and then you tend to do things you can come back to. So you might do like scrapbooking or a big craft or a beading thing, or I don't know why I always go to the art projects. But what I've noticed is when you do special time, well, I do know why. Now that's your fault, I guess, the art project. But one-on-one, even someone asked, one-on-one, even for a teen, sit with your kids and just do something with them. And that it kind of works like putting deposits in the bank. And it's not like once the money is there, it's there and you can pull it out when you need it. It just builds goodwill, helps the kid process its feelings. And that's what kind of play therapy is. It's helping a kid, just following their lead and playing along with them, trying to not ask them so many questions during that time, which is really tricky. It's amazing how many questions you ask in a 5-minute period when you're noticing. But just giving them the space to do their thing and following along and just being positive with them.
Well, probably
And
a good
then,
idea to do that with your spouses too.
yeah, totally. Pick a thing, do a puzzle. It's hard. It's like you're not going out, so there's not so many opportunities to kind of connect, even though you'd think you'd be more connected, and we're not. And one more thing, reach out for more help if you need it. So this can mean just making sure to check in with the people that really make you feel good, but it could also mean reaching out for therapy. I know that sometimes, especially for some people, there's still well, I don't need therapy. And yeah, okay, but there are people like me who went to school for a long time to be able to help other people who need help learn practical skills. So why not? And yeah, therapy is virtual, and you might say it's not the time. I've done a bunch of therapy sessions with people in their cars. I feel like they're about to record a TikTok. This crowd might be a little too old for that reference, but but that's, it's an option. And I'll also throw up my favorite search function to find a therapist. abct.org is a fantastic resource, and now they have a search that you can look for therapists that are doing virtual therapy.
So do you want to, should we take a look at the chat now, or you want to, and then you'll close up?
I see a bunch of questions. So someone asked me if it's normal for teenagers with anxiety to be indifferent right now towards Corona. It's something I'm seeing with my teens all over the place. They can't process it. Teenagers in general, their brains are all like, I'm invincible, nothing can hurt me. So then you say, hey, don't go out or you're going to kill grandma. And they're like, what do I care? And it's not that they don't care. It's just, how do you process that? They can't. So it's normal to shut down. And then it's also normal as a parent to put down the hard line of I'm sorry, you're still not going out and seeing your friends. I don't care because we need to keep everybody safe and I can't have you sneaking out. But it is normal, and it's okay to validate their feelings that way. To say I know that this is tough. I know you don't care about this. What can I do to make it easier for you? What can we do? And also my teenagers, not my own, my patient teenagers are all about I'm bored. I'm so bored, especially the seniors. I feel so bad for the seniors, the 8th graders too, the graduating ones who are missing out on so many things. Yeah. Especially with the year winding down, they have nothing to do. They don't have the school and they don't have work. So they're very in an in-between place and they don't know what to do. And your job, another thing you can Google is lists of pleasurable activities. There are lists on lists, and they're going to roll their eyes at some of the things. But you know what? Teenagers roll their eyes at everything. So you know what? Find a 3D puzzle that'll take you 700 hours. And if you can get them to do it, even if they're saying they're not liking it, there are a couple things that we can do to help with the boredom. You want to find activities that build mastery, so help them do something. So learning a language, learning to cook, it's a great time to teach people how to do all those things, make kibbeh balls or whatever. Might as well, you have all the time. So learning a skill is really helpful, and also doing things you value is really helpful. So if a kid is saying, I value chesed, then helping them figure out a way. I know there's a friend in my community is dropping notes and cookies to older people who can't leave their house, which is adorable. So that's something that you can help a teenager do to feel less bored. Someone else wrote their 6-year-old decided to give himself a haircut yesterday. Well, luckily no one else is seeing it. But that's a rough one.
I'm sorry, Linda.
Nail biting could be an anxiety thing. This is going to be not the advice that you want, but the more you say stop biting your nails, it's not going to work. You have to realize that you got to give your son an alternative. So what I do in therapy is help them figure out what happens before they bite their nails. Because if it's an anxiety thing, that feeling of anxiety is going to trigger the nail biting. So you don't want them to, once they start biting their nails, once he starts biting his nails, it's almost too late to change it. What you have to do is give him anxiety relief tips, like teach him how to deep breathe or teach him like some yoga poses so that when he's feeling tense and you're noticing that, he can do it then. And then also like when he's feeling tense, he has to put on gloves so he doesn't bite his nails. And what you do is also you reward for that. So you make a chart, like major, like, you know, every half hour you go without nail biting, you get a sticker, and then you go on Amazon or I don't know, I guess somewhere that delivers quicker, and you get a bunch of prizes, and you just keep throwing prizes at him, and you call him out. Not you never say stop nail biting. Instead, you say, "Where are your gloves? Put them on." So you give him something to do. So yeah, especially with the hands beginning to hurt, Band-Aids are a great way to stop nail biting too, because you can't bite your nails with Band-Aids on them, so it adds a step. It makes a kid pull the Band-Aids off, and then and if you're rewarding him for keeping his Band-Aids on his finger, then that's a way to stop the nail biting.
So there was a question from Flora. She said, do you expect toddlers to need therapy from this?
No, not necessarily. Toddlers are super resilient. They are amazing. I expect toddlers of parents who are super anxious and not handling this well to maybe need therapy from this. But a regular regular toddler, when things go back to normal, they will bounce back. And the truth is, when I work with toddlers, special time, it's magic. It's the thing that helps toddlers process their emotions. And also remember that kids process through play. So my 7-year-old was playing doctor yesterday, and she said something like, "This coronavirus is really bad these days, sir. I need to take care of you."
It's the cutest picture I ever saw in my life.
She put on her mask and her everything. She was all set. It was very cute. But that's good. You want to encourage that. You want to ask them, like, heck, you know, well, with a toddler, it's just model emotion words. I'm really sad that I can't leave my house and see grandma. And that's okay. It's okay to feel sad. I'm going to call my grandma now.
Grandma said about that too, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Just so you know. So Terry asked for tips on getting kids to read. And there's an exclamation point, so she really cares about that.
Oh, I know. It's so hard. Well, you know what? It depends on how old your kids are. I know my first grader also does not like reading, and it's hard. But it's more important to get kids loving reading than actually, you know, the skills. So you can trick them into reading, you know, like audiobooks are great. Reading to them is great.
She said they're 10 and 8.
10 and 8. Yeah. So, but audiobooks, those are really great. Podcasts that have to do with reading. Story Pirates is actually a great kind of not really reading, but writing stories. You want to get them interested in stories much more than reading. Especially the 10-year-old, they already have reading skills. 8 is a little bit borderline. So also let them read anything they want, even if it's garbage. You know, comic books, you know.
Cereal boxes.
Can attest. Cereal boxes. I remember my brother read only Goosebumps books for like 3 years. Those are awful, but whatever. It doesn't matter as long as they're reading words. So find something that they're willing to read, even if they're not a reading kid, but they like, let's say, the first thing that pops into my head is building Legos, but that's a bad one because there's no words. But sometimes there's that in-between, finding in-between tasks that have directions that they have to read. That's fine.
Baking, maybe?
Yeah, recipes. Recipes are great. America's Test Kitchen has a whole kids site that's fantastic, and it's written in an easier way, so kids are supposed to be able to do it on their own. So that's if they're into baking but not reading, you know, hand them a recipe and say, okay, make lemonade, you know.
Right, so I think there's one last question. What to tell kids about summer and going to camp and maybe going to Deal or not going to Deal and all that stuff?
Look, it's exactly what we tell them the truth. We don't know yet. I am a big proponent of don't lie to your kids. We don't know yet. All options are still on the table. My guess is camp is not happening, but my guess is my guess, and it could be that I'm wrong. One thing that I've been saying a lot is tolerating uncertainty is not a thing that anyone likes to do. We don't like it. It does not feel good to not know the future. But we don't know the future. It could be that it ends up better than we expected. It could be that it ends up worse, or it could be that it ends up exactly the same, but we're not going to know. So your job is to refocus on the present. So when your kids ask about camp, say, I wish I knew. You know, when I have any information, I'll tell you. And then tell them. Don't lie to them. Don't hold it back. You know, when Cuomo canceled school for the rest of the year, it's not good to tell your kids, oh, we'll see what happens. It's good to tell them, I just heard school is canceled. I'm really sad about it. We saw it was coming, but it's still sad.
So I have one last question here. Teen is anxious about all the school he's missed. He's not happy about the decreased workload. He's worried that he won't be learning what he needs to next year. And how would you respond appropriately?
Well, everybody, first again, always validate your kids' feelings. So you're worried about missing work. I get that. It's scary to miss this much work. But guess what? Everybody else missed the work too. If you think that next year's school is going to start the same place that it was supposed to and not 3 months back at the very least, you have you are living in a dream world. The teachers and the schools are going to have to make up for this time. You know, and you know what? Again, this is my own guess that hopefully I'm wrong. They're going to need something to do all summer. So you could always make it up in the summer if you wanted to, which is, if it makes a kid feel better, I would say that. I would never say that to a kid who does not care, because they don't care. But one thing I think that this whole crisis has highlighted is that grades by themselves are not a great motivator for a lot of kids. So teachers have had to scramble to figure out what motivates kids to actually learn. And really good teachers are figuring that out, but some teachers are not. And it's also hard because as a parent, all of a sudden you're seeing kind of behind the curtain and you're figuring out like, okay, I don't like that the school does this. Where, you know, sometimes it's better to not know what's in the sauce. But really just, I would say for all your kids, just focus on validating their feelings. All their feelings are okay the same way all yours are okay. So it's not don't be sad. It's okay to feel sad. Let's sit down and figure out how to do something that makes us happy, but it's okay to feel sad.
That's a good one. So I think our time is just about coming to a close. So do you have any final messages?
Yeah, sure. So I like people to know that you can't change your circumstances. We're stuck here right now, but we can decide the kind of person we want to be in this situation. So parent, child, sibling, spouse, we get to decide what kind of person we want to be throughout this crisis. And that's something we absolutely can control. So it can be tough, but we have to find a way to live within our values. And when we mess up, we can forgive ourselves and try again. So good enough parenting is all about picking yourself up and trying again. So thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much on behalf of everyone at the center. Really, really appreciate the time. And I think you gave us a lot of helpful tips to get through this. And hopefully we'll see each other soon.
Hopefully. I have backyard. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.